people often assume that influence comes from how loud you are, how many words you can throw into a room, how forceful your argument sounds. But the truth is, power doesn't speak loudly. Power whispers. It withholds. It creates space, tension, uncertainty. And nothing builds psychological control more than controlled silence. That's the essence of law, for in the 48 laws of power, always say less than necessary. At face value, it might sound like another version of think before you speak, but this law runs deeper than that. It's not just about avoiding slips or mistakes. It's about strategic ambiguity. It's about making people come to you, filling in the blanks with their own interpretations, emotions, and fears. Because when people don't know what you're thinking, they overthink. And the more they overthink, the more control you quietly gain over the narrative. Robert Greene doesn't glorify silence just because it sounds cool or mysterious. He's drawing from a long legacy of rulers, thinkers, and manipulators who knew that power flows toward the person who seems like they don't need to explain themselves. Think about the king who speaks little, and each word becomes law. The CEO who sits in silence while a room tries to interpret their mood. The partner in a relationship who responds with calm indifference while the other person spins into emotional chaos. In all these cases, the less you say, the more others feel compelled to react. You become the center of gravity. And most people don't get this. They think power comes from proving their intelligence, from defending their ego, from saying more. But real power is when you don't flinch, don't explain, don't react to bait. It's when people lean in to hear your next move, and you give them nothing. Because the minute you start talking too much, the illusion breaks. Your thoughts become exposed. Your strategy becomes visible. And worst of all, you give others the tools to attack or outmaneuver you. In psychological terms, this is what behavioral economists call information asymmetry. The person who knows more and reveals less has leverage. In every negotiation, every seduction, every confrontation, the one who says less is usually the one in control. They don't commit. They don't offer unnecessary opinions. They let silence do the heavy lifting. And silence, when used right, is louder than shouting. Even in ancient times, the wisest advisors understood this. Chinese strategist Sun Tzu warned that in warfare, when you are strong, appear weak, when you are near, appear far. The game is always one of misdirection, misperception, and mystique. Words expose your hand. Silence hides it. Now, that doesn't mean you go full mute. This isn't about never speaking. It's about mastering restraint. Saying what needs to be said, and only that. It's about the rhythm, the timing, the weight of your words. You speak when it amplifies your power. You remain silent when speaking would weaken it. Let's look at a real-world example. Take Steve Jobs. In negotiations, he would often sit silently while others nervously filled the room with chatter. His silence wasn't passive. It was calculated. It forced people to project their own anxieties onto him. They assumed he was unimpressed, that he was judging them, that he had some upper hand they couldn't see. And that illusion? That quiet dominance? It worked. Or take Barack Obama. You might not agree with his politics, but he mastered the art of pausing. He didn't rush to speak. He left gaps in his sentences. And those gaps drew people in, made them listen, made his words feel deliberate. Even if you didn't like what he said, you felt that it carried weight. Because it wasn't cluttered with fluff. Compare that to someone who talks too much, too fast, explaining every thought and defending every emotion. That kind of verbal diarrhea kills mystery. It kills tension. And tension is essential to power. You need people guessing. Uncertain. A little off balance. In relationships, this law becomes even more powerful. People crave emotional clarity, but they also chase emotional unavailability. It's the paradox. The person who overshares too quickly loses their allure. But the one who holds back, who reveals themselves slowly, who stays just slightly out of reach, they trigger longing, curiosity, intrigue. Because humans are wired to chase what they can't fully grasp. That's why the mystics, the poets, the seducers, the icons, they all understood that the most powerful presence isn't the loudest in the room. It's the one who doesn't need to announce themselves. Who can look you in the eye, say one sentence, and leave you spiraling for days. Now here's the twist: silence doesn't just manipulate others. It disciplines you. It trains you to pause, to think, to detach. It keeps your emotions in check. When you speak less, you're forced to become more intentional. And that intentionality builds internal strength. You stop reacting. You start responding. You watch. You calculate. You become harder to read, harder to manipulate, and harder to defeat. But the moment you lose control of your mouth, you lose control of the game. Even the way you respond to insults matters. If someone tries to provoke you, and you react with anger, they've already won. But if you say nothing? If you just look at them like they're beneath commentary? That silence becomes humiliation. It sends a stronger message than any comeback ever could. So this law isn't just about speaking less. It's about creating an atmosphere. A kind of quiet that feels dangerous. A silence that makes people unsure of where they stand with you. That kind of silence turns you into a mirror, and people begin revealing themselves without even realizing it. And that's when you win. Power is never just about what you do. It's about how you're perceived. And when you speak less, you control the frame. You control how others see you. You become unpredictable. And in a world that fears uncertainty, unpredictability is dominance. So remember this: the person who can say everything and chooses to say nothing is far more powerful than the one who can't stop talking. Say less than necessary. Always.